things your report writes is that legal rulemaking occurred in response to the pandemic in a way that rubbed against what might otherwise be considered essential elements in a system of democratic government based on the rule of law. Can you talk us through what you mean by that?
Yeah, I can. I'll give you three examples. The first one is about the role of Parliament. So ordinarily, under the rule of law, it's Parliament's job to make the law, and it's the government's job to then administer that law. During the pandemic, laws were being made, extraordinarily wide-ranging and intrusive laws were being made by the government without that usual parliamentary oversight. The second element of that is that because those new laws made through public health orders were being made so rapidly and so frequently, it was increasingly difficult for the public to even know what laws, what rules they were required to abide by at any particular point in time. And one element of the rule of law is the obvious one, which is that people are entitled to know what laws apply to them in order that they can comply. The third element is about enforceability, which is that one element of the rule of law is that laws should be enforced proportionately across society. In this case, there's pretty clear evidence, including from Boxar and others, that some of the public health orders were enforced in a way that was disproportionately impactful on communities, particularly communities of lower socioeconomic status.
Why is a complaints mechanism so important in times of crisis?
Well, a complaints mechanism is always important, but it's particularly important during times of crisis because some of the things that usually happen before laws are made, before rules are imposed, don't happen. So, for example, during a crisis, the government has to respond rapidly, adaptively to novel situations. And they often do so in ways that themselves are novel and that may have significant impact on individual rights. They do so without the opportunity for widespread public consultation or public debate. What that means is that if those mechanisms aren't in place before the rules are determined and implemented, it's really important that after those rules are in place, there are clear mechanisms to identify issues, unfairnesses, and unintended consequences so that they can be fixed as soon as possible.
What kind of response do you want to see taken to your report?
Well, two of the suggestions we've made in the report, the first suggestion we've made is to ensure that during any crisis, complaint handling is included in the planning and design of the crisis response from the very beginning.
Trinity is
so that
concerned.
people know exactly what their internal and external mechanisms are for making a complaint, for having their concerns addressed, and for improving the crisis response.
Imperative.
The second suggestion we've made is that the government should proceed as expeditiously as possible with the implementation of OPCAT. So this is the international treaty relating to torture and other ill treatment in places of detention. Had OPCAT been in place in New South Wales, that regime would have applied to places like hotel quarantine, as well as, of course, to traditional places of detention like prisons and youth detention.
That's New South Wales Ombudsman Paul Miller. This is ABC News Radio. I'm Rachel Hayter, making news. Federal Treasurer Jim Chalmers says the latest GDP figures are solid, but don't show the full picture. The figures from the ABS show Australia's economy grew 0.9% in the June quarter and 3.6% through the year. The president of Timor-Leste has suggested Indonesia may fund a gas pipeline in the region if a deal can't be reached with Australian energy giant Woodside. Jose Ramos Horta has called on the Australian government to intervene to help resolve a lengthy standoff over plans to pipe gas from the Greater Sunrise Field south of Timor-Leste. And the coronial inquest into the death of Yundamu man Kumanjai Walker has heard family members thought he was being flown to hospital, when his body was in fact still at the police station on the night he died. Around 1,000 childcare centres are expected to close or reduce operations around the country today as staff walk off the job to demand better pay and conditions. In Australia, an entry-level employee under the Childcare Workers Award is paid just 47 cents above the minimum wage at $21.85 per hour. Childcare staff say they want a fair share of the extra federal government funding that's been promised for parents, warning many staff can't afford to stay in the sector and will be forced to leave at a time they're needed most. Reporter Stephanie Smale is at a childcare centre in Ipswich, west of Brisbane.
Like hundreds of other childcares around Australia, staff here are planning to walk off the job early this afternoon. So this particular centre won't be shutting its doors entirely. It will still be open for a handful of families who do need it. But the centre director, Anne Pickles, says the majority of families, so that's about 70 for this centre, have either kept their kids home or will be coming to pick them up soon in a show of support for staff.
We really need change within the industry. We need professional wages, we need better working conditions, we need smaller child to staff ratios, and we need the government to really support us and provide the resources to be able to cater and give quality of care for children, especially if they're talking about making the childcare subsidy more accessible for families.
Could it be up to operators to pass those better subsidies on to staff?
You know, it really comes back to those negotiations between our head office and our board to work with the government, the federal government.
So you're looking to the federal government to make overarching changes to essentially force operators to pass them through?
I guess so, yeah, definitely. I think that's the federal government's talked about us for a while now, and we just kind of seem to be that forgotten sector, especially in the last couple of years during COVID. We are frontline workers and the recognition just has not been there for everything we've done. We are burnt out, and some of our signs outside today say cupcakes won't pay our bills, which is really, really relevant to sometimes how we feel. You know, we get cupcakes and chocolates and things like that, but we need real change. You know, we have so many qualifications that back our positions here, but unfortunately a lot of us will probably be better off going to work in a fast food industry where they get paid more.
That was Bellbird Park Childcare Centre Director Anne Pickles. And Steph, unions are saying tens of thousands of families will be affected by today's strike. How widespread is the action?
Well, Sally, reportedly widespread. Childcare staff across the country are expected to take part in the planned rallies this afternoon, with Brisbane staff heading to the CBD to take part in their rally. Jessica Martin, who is an education at this centre, she also has a son and a daughter enrolled here, will be taking part. I spoke to her at the centre this morning. She told me she's angry that childcare operators aren't passing on more of their profits to staff, and she says she's actually seriously considering leaving the sector in search of better wages.
Being honest, I live week to week. My husband and I both work full-time, so I have actually considered leaving. This has been a discussion with my husband for the last 6 months I've been having, and I'm actually looking to study elsewhere to be able to move forward financially with my life. I feel like it's such an important role that we play, but at the end of the day I need to provide for my family.
Is there frustration that operators haven't passed down more of their profits to staff?
Most definitely. It's hard to see how much full fee childcare is to know how much I earn. There's a very big gap in to understand where those finances have gone.
That's childcare educator Jessica Martin, and before her, reporter Stephanie Smale speaking with Sally Sarah. And those strikes are due to get underway around the country in just over 10 minutes. The federal government wants to free up housing supply for young families by encouraging pensioners to downsize their homes. The legislation will be tabled in Parliament today, extending the asset test exemption on home sale proceeds from 12 months to 2 years. The change would give pensioners more time to buy or build a new home, before the extra money in their bank account affects their pension payments. CEO of the Council on the Ageing Australia, Ian Yates, says it's not a silver bullet to fix the housing crisis, but it's a good step.
This is a sensible step because some people are certainly concerned that, with the supply chain issues we've had, long delays in building, they're sensibly concerned that they might be running a risk if they go on this path. What we're talking about here are people who want to sell their house and need the proceeds of that, say, to build or buy into somewhere else. It's a different thing if you've got enough resources that you can buy and sell independently of each other. These people then are regarded as non-homeowners for their pension eligibility, which allows them to have more income and assets for a period, and it also means that if they're renting in this period, they're eligible for Commonwealth rent assistance. So it's a significant incentive for that group of people, and to extend it by another year at the moment is very, very sensible. None of us know, and the Minister says she hopes it will lead to more people downsizing or right-sizing, we prefer to use, right-sizing, because it is often not so much about I want to have a lot less rooms. I might need as many rooms because we're both now working and living from home. But it means it's not, a modern house, an energy efficient house, a convenient house, a accessible house, and maybe a much smaller garden. And those are the kind of more specialist seniors housing programs that are becoming increasingly popular. So people want to do that, but they're scared, that if it all doesn't happen in the time frame, then they'll be hit with the higher deeming rate.
Because a pensioner or any other eligible income support recipient, they've already got those 12 months. They're exempt from Social Security asset tests for 12 months. The additional 12 months makes it 2 years. Do you think that's the time frame that pensioners who may have been on the cusp of considering this, who were wavering, that's enough time to get them across the line?
Look, I certainly think it will make a significant difference, and what I think is that people who might have a couple of years ago said, we'll do that, are now probably saying, look at how long it's taking for builds to happen, economically things are a bit uncertain, we'd be taking a risk to do that if we can't guarantee it. So I think it's a sensible decision from the Commonwealth's point of view. They can always review further down the track economically if they take it back, but I don't think people will decide to take 2 years to do the process. I think it takes away the anxiety that if it's not done, we're going to be hit. It won't be eligible for the Commonwealth rent assistance. We're going to be hit by the higher deeming rate. Oh dear. So it's too much risk. Let's just stay where we are.
But doesn't the housing market as it exists right now, Ian Yates, present a similar problem to those who might pensioners who might be right-sizing, as you say? Wouldn't they be facing just the same kind of problem of where to go and how to find the place?
That certainly is true, although increasingly we're seeing more innovation in the seniors housing market, more builders and developers listening to what older people actually want. So I think it is becoming, it's an exciting time in terms of seniors housing for varieties, and a recognition that older people are very different from each other, and what suits one family won't suit another. So what this is saying is the Minister's saying, look, some people are using this. They will have identified from some people who have inquired that the time frame has caused some of people who might have taken it up to hesitate. I don't think that the government or the Minister is saying this is some kind of silver bullet. They're saying this is a scheme that some people out there are using. It's freeing up some housing. It's giving them a better older life, later life housing choice. And there's an impediment about the time frame we've been using, so let's get rid of the impediment without compromising the pension system.
CEO of Council on the Ageing Australia, Ian Yates, speaking with ABC Radio Melbourne's Virginia Trioli. You're listening to ABC News Radio. Now it's time for sport with Daniel Garb.
Thank you, Rachel. Nick Kyrgios is currently serving to try and stay in the US Open. He is down 5-3 in the fifth set in his quarterfinal battle with Karen Khachanov, but he has just held serve. So it is 5-4 now. Karen Khachanov to serve for the match to try and make it through to the semi-final to take on Norway's Casper Ruud. So Kyrgios has to break in the next game in order to stay in this quarter-final. It is a gripping battle at the moment. We'll keep you updated on that game throughout the afternoon and potentially by the end of this sports news break here on ABC News Radio. An important hold from Kyrgios. Now he needs to break or he's out of the US Open. Ajla Tomljanovic, unfortunately, is out. The Aussie lost to Tunisia's Ons Jabeur in her quarter-final in New York in the early hours of the morning. The fifth seed defeated Tomljanovic in straight sets, 6-4, 7-6. Ons Jabeur will now play France's Caroline Garcia in the semi-final. In the AFL, Fremantle coach Justin Longmuir says he's conscious of avoiding another slow start. The side faces Collingwood in its semi-final at the MCG on Saturday. The Dockers have lost their past 3 opening quarters, including letting the Western Bulldogs kick the first 6 goals in last weekend's elimination final. Longmuir says his side has to adjust to early pressure better.
Reviewed that pretty heavily. We don't want to be in that situation. So, we need to get our contest work a lot better and, need to execute the basics under pressure a lot better than we did early in the game.
The Brisbane Lions say they don't fear playing at the MCG despite their dismal record at the ground. Brisbane takes on Melbourne in Friday's AFL semi-final, hoping to break their 8-year drought at the venue. Midfielder Hugh McGluggage says there were encouraging signs from the round 20 match against the Tigers, and he insists there's no MCG hoodoo.
Nah, not at all. Not at all. We're looking forward to the challenge. We showed against Richmond in the first half that we can play really good footy there, and it doesn't worry us at all. We obviously understand what's happened there and the fact that we haven't won there for quite some time, but we just see it as a huge opportunity.
The North Queensland Cowboys captain says Saturday's NRL qualifying final against the Sharks will be a tight affair. Cubs finished 3rd and 2nd on the ladder respectively. Jason Tomalolo says Cronulla at home is always a challenge.
They've got a big forward pack, led around by Nick Lyons, so he's been playing great. So we're going to have our hands full and we're going to look to hopefully give them a good run down there.
Celtics Australian manager Ange Postecoglou has bemoaned his side's failure to take their chances in the first half of their 3-0 Champions League defeat to Real Madrid this morning. The Scottish champions wasted opportunities in the first half in what was the first time an Australian had led a side out in European competition. Postecoglou told Stan Sport, "You can't afford to do that against a side of Real Madrid's stature."
This level, it's fine margins, and I thought the first goal was always going to be important. I thought right up until that first goal went in, we were right in the game. We probably had the better opportunities and we didn't take them, and once they scored, they took control of the game.
And Australian golfer Cam Davis has been selected in the internationals team for this month's President's Cup at Quail Hollow in North Carolina. The world number 62 has been included as one of Trevor Immelman's 6 captain's picks to face the US. Fellow Australian Adam Scott is also in the team as one of 6 automatic qualifiers. That's the 10th time he's made the international side. Cam Smith and Mark Leishman are banned from the event after joining the Saudi-backed Live Series. Australian Lucas Herbert wasn't selected as one of the captain's picks. That was a controversial omission, but all eyes are on New York at the moment from an Australian sport point of view. Karen Khachanov is up 5-4 in the 5th set and 30-15 up on his serve. He's serving to make it through to the semi-finals and to eliminate Nick Kyrgios. Kyrgios is hanging on. He needs to break Khachanov here. If he loses at this point on Khachanov's serve, he's in big trouble. So it's 30-15 and 5-4 to Khachanov. And Nick Kyrgios is battling to stay in this match, and he has lost that point. So Khachanov now has 2 match points in New York to move through to the semi-finals. Nick Kyrgios is up against it. Rachel, I don't think there's quite enough time for us to talk us through the next point or so. So we'll update listeners during the news or after the news on the result of this, but Khachanov has 2 match points now. It looks like Nick Kyrgios, his US Open run may end at the quarterfinal stage.
Very tense. Daniel Garb, thank you. Watching that match closely for us. Stay with us here on ABC News Radio. Coming up after the news, we'll have another look at the GDP figures. They show Australia's economy remains resilient despite surging inflation and rapid interest rate rises. Official data showing economic growth bounced in the second quarter of this year. We're going to go back to sport now. Daniel Garb has some news for us.
Nick Kyrgios is out of the US Open, so Karen Khachanov has beaten him 6-4 in the fifth set to win through to the semi-finals. Kyrgios is out, and it looks like one of his rackets copped a battering on the way off the court. So unfortunately, Nick Kyrgios can't back up his Wimbledon final appearance. He is out at the quarter-final stage of the US Open to Russia's Karen Khachanov.
Breaking sport news there, Daniel Garb, thank you. Coming up to 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 2:30 in Central Australia, and 1 p.m. in the West, that's news time.
Good afternoon, Sarah Bassett with ABC News. Police say speeding is a possible factor in the deadly car crash that killed 5 teenagers southwest of Sydney. 3 teenage girls and 2 boys, all from Picton High School, were killed when a car hit a tree in Buxton last night. The 18-year-old driver was the sole survivor of the crash. Acting Inspector Jason Hogan says the vehicle was overcrowded and potentially exceeding the speed limit.
That is one of the lines of inquiry that we are undertaking. There was 6 people in the vehicle and it's registered as a 4-seater vehicle. At this stage, we are investigating all lines of inquiry, but our preliminary investigations would indicate that speed is a possible factor in relation to this crash.
The federal opposition says the latest GDP figures are promising, but wants more action on tackling inflation. The GDP figures show the economy has grown by 0.9% in the June quarter and 3.6% over the year. The government says the figures are solid, but also show consumption is high and household savings are down. Shadow Treasurer Angus Taylor says it's on the government to come up with a plan to dampen inflation.
The longer they wait, the worse it gets. The longer they wait, the more the Reserve Bank has to do to take the strength out of the demand side, and that's what we don't want to see.
The president of Timor-Leste has suggested Indonesia may fund a gas pipeline in the region if a deal cannot be reached with Australian energy giant Woodside. Jose Ramos-Horta has called on the Australian government to intervene to help resolve a lengthy standoff over plans to pipe gas from the Greater Sunrise Fields south of Timor-Leste. Woodside is pushing to pipe the gas down to Darwin for processing rather than to the north, as preferred by the Timor-Leste government. Mr. Ramos-Horta says many neighbouring nations would be willing to finance the project, including China.
Indonesia has a huge gas field called Abadi, which is very near the Greater Sunrise. So Indonesia is a potential investor in the Greater Sunrise. Why not? South Korea is one of the great potential investors.
New Zealand's foreign minister says she sees no need for a new security treaty being discussed between Australia and Papua New Guinea. PNG correspondent Natalie Whiting reports.
Australia and PNG have had initial discussions about a potential security treaty between the two countries. PNG's Foreign Minister Justin Tichenko says officials are working on a draft ahead of a ministerial forum in Canberra in November. He had said that New Zealand may be involved, but that country's Foreign Minister Nanaia Mahuta has ruled that out. She says existing agreements obligate Pacific countries to call on one another first for security issues.
And unless Pacific partners are saying that those are inefficient, then there's really no need for a new set of arrangements.
Minister Mahuta is visiting PNG and met with her counterpart today.
A document describing a foreign government's nuclear capabilities has reportedly been found in the FBI's search of former US President Donald Trump's home. The report in the Washington Post does not say which foreign government or whether it's friendly or hostile. The FBI recovered more than 11,000 government documents and photographs during its search last month. The Post says some of the documents detail top-secret US operations that require special clearance. Hundreds of childcare workers and their supporters are gathering at Federation Square in Melbourne to demand better pay and conditions. Mary Gearan is there.
About 500 childcare workers have gathered in Fed Square, supported by a few parents, kids as well. They plan to march to Fitzroy Gardens. The United Workers Union says about 1,000 centres are closed today for rallies around the country. It's not put specifics around the level of pay rise it's demanding, but it wants educators to be paid enough to make it worth their while to stay